so now that I've mapped in my basic, value pattern, my basic structure of the drawing, now I can go in and start particularizing individual objects. So you could choose wherever you want to start and choose an object and go from there. You know what? I think I'm going to start with this bottle because that was our anchor object and I just really like it, and I'm kind of intrigued to start playing with the highlights and shadows on it. So now I'm going to go back into it. I've mapped out some basic things, but you can see there's nothing down here. There's a lot of particulars missing. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to charge this up. I'm going to go in and start putting some more particular value shapes that I see on the object. Just very soon is going to be when I start pulling out my charcoal pencil for this object, because it's an object that's pretty small and it has lots of small shapes. So I'm going to do as much as possible with this blending stump, using it as a drawing tool to get small shapes in, but there's just going to come a point where if I need a little more specificity, a little more examination of small shapes, I just need to pull out that charcoal pencil. Okay, so I'm going to start off with, I think, my HB, which is my hardest pencil, so it's going to give me the lightest and crispiest line. And I also want my hard eraser, the little edges on the hard eraser I can use to draw in highlights. And I'm seeing like there's a really strong highlight here that is happening. And I can go in like even with a pencil eraser, like a pencil you use for school that has a little eraser on it, and I could use that to draw in specifics. There's a round highlight there. It's like the glass is embossed. Drawing that, drawing this highlight. What makes things look like glass are how the value shapes split. There's high highlights and there's dark shadows. And often the high highlights, will cut across things and sit on the surface of the object, which accentuates the glassy quality. I probably need eventually to get a smaller eraser. This one's a little big and clunky for what I'm trying to do. Okay, but I'm going to leave it there for now. All right, I'm pulling out my charcoal pencil and I'm going to plug in, I'm actually going to put my glasses on. Since now I'm dealing with more specifics, I'm going to go in and put in little small shapes, and I need my reading glasses so I can see what I'm doing. If you break everything down into value shapes, where you're not thinking so much about, oh, this is made of, this object is tricky. If you just think of everything as value shapes, shapes of light and dark, you understand that you can draw anything. You're just drawing value shapes. That's all there is to it. And if you observe it carefully, make relationships, it's gonna be perfect. And here, you know how I said there's no outlines, we're not drawing outlines? I'm actually not drawing an outline. I'm drawing a value shape that happened to be on the edge of the object. So yeah, it may kind of look like an outline, but it's actually just a shadow that's happening along that edge. And I notice it doesn't go all the way down, it actually disappears. Then the highlight comes in, and then I have another little value shape here. Okay, I'm gonna plug that in. Plug in this dark little value shape I'm seeing. Plug in this. Got a little bit of a cast shadow on the ground. Okay, I think I will leave it here for now, and I'll work on this a little bit and then show you where it's at. Let's see, let me do a couple little more strokes here. Okay, so you can see how I'm building the shapes of light and dark in that little bottle. And as I said, I'm gonna keep, looking back into it and refining my little shapes, and then I'll show you where it, how it turned out. So I ended up, I drew in the bottle, and then just because I was excited about it, I drew in the little seed pod as well. I ended up using these three utensils mostly: the HB pencil, the blending stump, and just a pencil cap eraser, and I used my kneaded eraser as well. So you can see that I plugged in highlights and shadows in the bottle, and I did this in a soft way since the surface is really soft. And then I drew in the seed pod, and it is built up of more sort of crisp, sharp, delineated shapes. So I drew them in a crispier way. When I drew in the values in the bottle, they were a little sharp for it, and they were sort of floating on top. Visually, it didn't, the texture didn't match the softness of the bottle. So after I drew them in with my HB pencil, I ended up going back and sort of tracing over them and softening it with the blending stump. So I wanted those shapes soft, but I wanted them really crisp here. So I didn't go over them. I just let them be. Something else I wanted to mention was, if you don't see something, don't draw it. So the light source is coming from the left and illuminating the left side of the setup, but the right side is backlit, basically. If the light's coming from here, this is all in shadow. So because it's in shadow, I drew it in shadow. Like if I didn't see something here, if it just looked like it was an area of black, I just drew an area of black. If you don't see it, don't make it up. Draw what you see, and then it'll be more convincing, and we'll understand, oh, the light source is coming from here, and this part is in shadow. So I finished up this part of my drawing, and the next thing I would do is just move to the next object. You can see here that I've used my compressed charcoal to map in the very darkest areas of the bird. So next I used my blending stump and a charcoal pencil I used the blending stump to soften the charcoal that I had put in, and then I wanted a nice crisp, well delineated edge. So I kind of put in some small value shapes and crisped up the edges with a charcoal pencil. And I also used the charcoal pencil to start putting in some smaller value shapes, which I again softened with the blending stump. I used my pencil cap eraser and a charcoal pencil to put in my last little details, my last little darks and lights, and the bird is done. Mapping in the dark shapes really loosely with the compressed charcoal. I softened the value shapes using my blending stump and making sure to move the strokes in the direction of the plane. Lastly, I put in small shadow shapes and highlight shapes with the charcoal pencil and a small hard eraser, and my bottle and stick are done. For our last object, the little metal bottle cap, I mapped in the darks. I looked at the still life and I mapped in the darks with my compressed charcoal. And next I'm gonna soften them with a blending stump and then use a charcoal pencil and an eraser to draw in detail, shadows, and highlights. So I softened the charcoal with a blending stump, and then I went in with a charcoal pencil and drew in small shadow shapes and little details, and took a small hard eraser and drew in the highlights. And now my bottle cap is done. So here's my final drawing. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey. I hope you've learned that drawing is a process. It starts light and loose and inaccurate, and it gets more refined as the drawing progresses. So I hope you realize that you can draw anything as long as you look carefully and draw the shapes, the relationships, and the values that you see. It's all about careful, close looking. And as with anything, the more we practice, the better we get. So the most important thing is to have fun. So thanks so much. All right, we're done.